Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for this live stream special on election protection. I'm Arlene Sweeting, and I'll be your host for the next hour of conversation. The United States is facing a crisis of confidence in its electoral process. In previous elections, we have largely accepted election results without worrying whether clerical errors or other administrative snafus change the outcome by 100 votes. But this November will be different. A high-stakes election coupled with rising partisan animosity will mean intense scrutiny over every aspect of the elections. And in the likely occurrence of mistakes and errors, political leaders have primed the American electorate to suspect foul play by the opposing party. This year, people are very concerned about making sure their votes count. And for the first time in my lifetime, there is concern that we may not have a peaceful transition of power. It is in this atmosphere that we welcome our two guests tonight. First, Anjenys Gonzalez-Eilert, the Executive Director of Common Cause Florida, a post she has held since January of 2018. Eilert is responsible for leading democracy reform efforts statewide for Common Cause Florida, a nonpartisan grassroots organization dedicated to upholding the core values of American democracy. Later in the program, and we'll be joined by, and you'll see right here on your screen, Gabrielle Velasco, the National Coordinator for Voting Rights at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights. The principal mission of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under law is to secure equal justice for all through the rule of law, targeting in particular the inequities confronting African Americans and other racial and ethnic minorities. So welcome, Anjenys and Gabrielle.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're going to start with Anjenys. And why don't you start by telling us more about your work at Common Cause Florida?
Absolutely. So as Arlene stated to our listeners, we are a grassroots nonpartisan organization. We are a watchdog organization, which means that we are responsible for holding power accountable. That is the mission of our organization. So anytime something goes miss, we are there to see. We are, as we're talking about this election, mostly concerned, and we will be discussing this evening, with the Election Protection Coalition program. I'm here in Florida, which of course is a swing state, which is often decided by just a couple thousand votes. So this program is particularly important in the state of Florida. I'm going to share my screen with you to walk you through a little bit about what this program is and what we do in the state of Florida to help protect and secure our elections for all voters, as we are a nonpartisan program and coalition. Okay. So as I was explaining, we are a nationwide coalition. We have over 100 organizations that participate in the Election Protection Coalition program. You can find us at 866-OUR-VOTE.org. You could also call 866-OUR-VOTE or text us. We are going to be discussing how this program functions in Florida. So, because it's nationwide, we have a structure that comes from nationwide all the way down to the grassroots local level, ending with individual volunteers. We are the largest nonpartisan voter protection program in the country, with over 100 participating organizations and growing by the day. We benefit from thousands of volunteers that help us staff the hotline, which Gabrielle will be speaking about, and the field program, which is what I will be sharing with you about. Our origin story in Florida. So in 2004, we started our legal component of this, which is the hotline. And in 2012, we started the grassroots field program, which is our poll monitoring volunteer component. The sole purpose of this election protection program is to ensure that every eligible voter can cast their ballot, because nothing is more important than a person who is eligible to vote being able to cast their ballot, and nothing should become between them and the ballot box. We are structured from the national point of view down, and we have several hotlines at the national level that help us accomplish this goal. The English one is the 866-R vote, but we also have hotlines in Spanish, in various of the Asian languages, and Arabic, and you will see those hotlines up on the screen. Then we bring it down to the state level. So at the state level, we have state partners that we work with all the way from the Panhandle, all the way down to the Florida Keys. In addition to the state partners, we have state partners that help provide special assistance in Florida, special communities. In this case, they provide a hotline for disability and for the Florida Rights Restoration. So the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition was responsible for helping push through a ballot measure that allows for returning citizens to return to the voting roster. There are some special requirements at times that they may need or special questions they may have, and this hotline is structured for them. We start at the state level with state partners from various organizations. They can be civic-minded, environmentally minded. It doesn't matter what type of organization. It's just an organization that says, I wish to partner with the coalition because we are interested and concerned about democracy and want to make sure that every eligible voter has their vote and voice heard. Then we structure it down to county leads. County leads are the groups that decide that they wish to adopt a county, for example. So they would say, I want to make myself responsible for helping organize the volunteers in this county. And so they help us make sure that we staff polling locations, make sure that we have folks trained, and that they have all the materials that they need to be successful in helping through this program. And then, of course, the most important component of the program are the volunteers themselves. And they help us by being out in the various polling locations during early voting and election day. The state of Florida has 67 counties. We try to cover as many counties as possible. So election protection is the nonpartisan coalition that we've spoken about. There are three types of folks that you will find at a polling location. There are poll monitors, which is what we train. The volunteers who are there, they have to be at the 150-foot electioneering line. We are not allowed into the polling locations. There are poll workers, which are those that are hired and trained by supervisors of elections. They are the folks you meet when you request your ballot. Then there are poll watchers. They are put in place by campaigns and candidates, and they have a special set of rules that they follow with the supervisors of elections. Then you have structures of command centers. Remember I told you about these county leads? Well, these county leads will set up command centers to help the poll monitors answer questions and make sure that we are providing the proper responses to voters when they need our assistance. And then, of course, there's always the hotline. Should the command center be busy or not have the proper response for it because the issue needs to be escalated, there are attorneys that staff the hotline at the 866-R vote. And Gabrielle will share more about that. So when we're talking about the Fields program, the poll monitoring volunteer component of it, what we do is we train our volunteers by providing them an overview of what the program does. We explain to them their roles and their responsibility, and then we provide them with frequently asked questions that we've noticed over the years that voters tend to have. So these are common scenarios that voters will ask us about. There are 4 options for volunteers when they wish to engage with the election protection program in Florida. The first 2 are field, the poll monitor, which is stationary and stationed at one particular polling location, or the roving poll monitors, which move between polling locations and follow a checklist to make sure that things are running smoothly. In addition to those top 2, which are the field on the ground, we also have virtual opportunities, and that is social media monitoring for disinformation and misinformation, and we have a special training that Those volunteers follow. And then we have a voter contact component, which is text banking and phone banking. So the role of the poll monitor, our volunteers, is to assist voters and to help us identify and address problems as they occur in real time. The sole purpose is to make sure that no voter leaves a polling location without having cast a ballot or having their issue resolved so that they can do so, if they are in fact an eligible voter. So we ensure that voters know their rights. What are the rules that governs the infrastructure of how they may vote? We answer voters' questions. Typical things that they will ask us: am I a registered voter? How can I find out? Am I at the correct polling location? During early voting, polling locations, you can choose which one you want to go to in your county, but on election day, you must go to your designated precinct and polling location. We're also going to receive, and we have been receiving, quite a bit of questions about vote by mail, because it's not just how do I make sure I return my process, but how do I follow up? How do I know that my ballot has been received? How do I know that my ballot that I turned in vote by mail has been counted? And we work through that with the voter. We have a system for reporting issues and how we move through the process. The first line of defense is going to be our poll monitor volunteer. Then our second line would be moving to the command center / county leads. We attempt to fix problems in real time. We have a collaborative relationship with supervisors of elections. We're not interested in a gotcha sort of mentality. We're interested in working alongside them because we have the same goal. We want to make sure that voters can vote. We also collect data on the conversations and issues that come up so that we can help address them for the future. Poll monitors are stationed at the electioneering no solicitation line. In Florida, that is a 150-foot zone that is very clearly marked. That 150-foot zone starts at the entrance of the polling location, and it works in a circle. We always observe being beyond that 150 feet, as we are not allowed to be inside. We would be considered the same as electioneering and campaigns. We have two different types of poll monitors, as I was explaining. The ones who stand at one particular polling location for their whole shift. A shift is usually 3 to 4 hours. Or the kind of poll monitor that roves. These have to have access to some form of transportation. It could be a car, you could go with a buddy, take a ride, you can go on a bicycle, a moped, as long as you have some form of transportation. Both types of poll monitors will clearly be identified. We train our poll monitors to please make sure that they wear very neutral clothing. As you will see, all of our stuff is marked in just plain black and white. And while we understand that's a little boring, it is by design. It is to make sure that we do not confuse the voter into thinking that we might be aligned with one campaign or candidate or another, as we are 100% nonpartisan. These poll monitors, whether they're roving or whether they're stationary, help us by checking off various things that we're looking for in a checklist to make sure that things are running smoothly and to help answer voters' questions as they come up. The reporting structure for them is they are trained. So a lot of them will have the answers to the questions that voters will have. However, should the situation be such that they need more in-depth, they can always escalate it by calling their county lead or the command center for their region. If that is still not enough to resolve the problem, we can always go back to the 866-R-VOTE and they can help us resolve the problem. Most of the time we can resolve the problem locally. However, there are times that things need to be escalated. They have several options as to how they can report in real time. We do use technology, so we take advantage of WhatsApp and Jotform to help us report things in real time. But for those volunteers that do not feel comfortable using technology, we also have the option of using paper reporting, and then they can scan it or merely take a picture of it and return it to us. Types of questions that we would typically get from a voter and that poll monitors would be equipped to reply. These would be, am I at the correct location? Am I registered to vote? What type of voter ID can I use in Florida? And I have questions about my vote by mail. Less frequently, we'll get questions about the voting equipment, if it's accessible to them, language accessibility, and disability accessibility. Again, our poll monitors are trained in responding to these questions. Some of the typical questions we could get for vote by mail could be, I haven't received my vote by mail ballot, even though I requested it. Can I still vote in person? The answer to that is actually yes. In Florida, if you've not received your vote by mail ballot, or even if you have received it and have simply changed your mind and decided you now wish to vote in person, you still have the option to do that. The poll worker can easily verify whether or not your vote by mail ballot has been received by the Supervisors of Elections office. When they verify that it has not, they allow you to vote in person with a regular ballot. So there's always an option. We try to let people know that you're not stuck with it if you've decided you've changed your mind. There's only one small caveat. On election day, if you had requested a vote by mail ballot and you decide to still return it, not to vote in person, you must drop it off at the Supervisor of Elections office. It can no longer be dropped off at a precinct polling location the way that it can during early voting. So in Florida, we have 12 different options for IDs. That makes it a lot easier to meet the ID requirement that the state has. It is not necessary that the ID that you provide to identify yourself have a matching address to what is in your registration, because they're not looking for the address. What they're looking for is to make sure that the person is who they say they are. Another flexibility with our ID system is that you can also mix and match IDs. So let's say you have a student ID and it has your photo and your name, but it doesn't have your signature. Well, you can match it with a debit card or a credit card that has your signature to provide for all the components that the poll worker would need. The one thing you cannot do is use an expired ID. Fortunately, a lot of these IDs that you can use do not have an expiration date, and you would not have anything to worry about. Something unique about Florida, when I mentioned about the address is, so let's say you moved last week and you haven't had an opportunity to update your registration. That's okay. You can still vote as long as you are in the correct polling location for your new address. During early voting, there's even more flexibility as you're allowed to vote in any of the early voting sites within your county. But in Florida, you live as a voter where you say you live. None of your IDs have to have the address that you are claiming that that's where you live. You simply can state it. Can you vote without an ID? In the state of Florida, you cannot vote without an ID. So if you've lost your ID, misplaced it, or simply forgot it, you would have to vote a provisional ballot and then have to go through the process of curing it. Other questions that we get are assistance questions. So a voter can choose to have anybody come in and help them. The only two people that they cannot bring in to help them is their employer or their union representative. And I can imagine why, you can understand why they don't allow that. But the voter can choose anybody else that they wish to bring in, even if that person is a child. So things that we're looking for when our poll workers are out there and they are deployed. So we want to make sure there's no intimidation or harassment that is occurring. We always tell our poll monitors not to engage. If there is a situation that seems to be getting out of control or escalating, we always tell them to go to safety first, to immediately call 866-OUR-VOTE and report it through the other structures. So the command center, the WhatsApp, and then await further instructions. Should something rise to the level, obviously, of it being dangerous, where they are worried that somebody could have physical harm, they see a weapon come out, something of that nature, obviously we indicate that they need to call 911. One of the worst things that we could possibly see, and this is something we train our poll monitors on to identify, but they could not handle this on the ground because this requires escalation to the hotline immediately, is if a voter gets to the front of the line and they find out that somebody has taken the time to challenge their eligibility as a voter. That is one of the worst scenarios we could possibly see. However, we are happy to report it does not happen frequently. In a case like that, we tell the person to keep the voter with them so that we can fill out a full and detailed incident report, and we immediately call the 866-R-VOTE so that we can help address it. The voter still has the right to cast a provisional ballot, although it's not the same as a regular ballot. Some other issues that we look for, just to give you an idea, are extremely long lines, broken machines, which can happen. They can overheat, they can get jammed, poll workers who are giving the wrong information. Oftentimes, this is not for nefarious reasons. Sometimes they simply had the wrong information or a misunderstanding. Intimidating flyers or police presence that seems uncomfortable. Voters reporting information that they're not on the rolls, provisional ballots are being handed out way too frequently, that the polls are opening late or closing early, or that speakers of a different language are still having issues with assistance or physical accessibility issues. So we go through a little pop quiz quickly with our poll monitor volunteers to make sure that they've captured the information that we share with them and help them understand that there are certain things we can and cannot do as a poll monitor. So obviously, as a nonpartisan poll monitor, you cannot volunteer for other parties' campaigns or anything affiliated with a particular group because you're supposed to be there in a nonpartisan capacity. And obviously, at the very end, we always remind people, please not to engage in any form of confrontation. We realize that everybody is very passionate and very excited about this election, and that's great. That's how democracy works. We want people to be engaged. We are all voters. As a matter of fact, this election is so unique that we have 5 generations of folks voting, everywhere from the silent generation to Generation Z. So we like the idea of knowing that there are so many different faces and so many different generations out there voting. If you want any further information, we always tell people to go to 866-R-VOTE. I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Gabrielle, and these are our partners at the state level. So I'm going to stop sharing.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Anjenys. That was a wonderful presentation.
All right. Well, let me just remind people, Gabrielle Velasco is with the National Committee on Civil Rights, the Lawyers Committee on Civil Rights. Yes. And so Anjenys has just kind of told us about the field component, and you're going to tell us a little bit more about the legal component of this project. So go right ahead.
Absolutely. So Anjenys gave a wonderful outlook and image into what our program does on a 365-day-a-year schedule. And I'll just give a little understanding of how it works on the other end of the hotline. So as she mentioned, the Election Protection Coalition and the coalition's work has been going on since the early 2000s. We currently are the largest national nonpartisan singular hotline in the country, serving all 50 states. And our goal, as she shared, is to make sure that every eligible voter is able to cast a ballot. And how do we do this? So we have a wonderful system through our hotline where legal volunteers are trained specifically to answer the most common and frequent questions, as well as the most complex questions, through a series of escalations and partnerships we have with our great partners on the ground like Common Cause Florida and Anjenys. So how do we do this? During the year, we are a 365-day program. So our hotline is live with live volunteers to answer your questions. We have prepared a number of resources and best practices. And as we've had this program for going into our second decade now, we're very familiar with the most common and some more infrequent issues like long lines, broken machines, and simple voter education questions like, how do I register to vote? Where is my polling location? What can I bring to the polls? We do this in a number of ways. As of this year, we have expanded our hotline to also allow for texting, as well as chat on our 866ourvote.org website, as well as Twitter, Facebook, and WhatsApp. And I also really want to emphasize that while 866-OUR-VOTE is our English language line, we do strongly value our partnerships with our other language lines and language access in the election protection space. We have thus far this year had 23,000 legal volunteers answer questions from across the country and have already taken over 100,000 calls from all 50 states. And these calls, we've been able to use a system of our networks in each state to be able to answer any question that a voter may have, whether it is, where is my absentee ballot, or what do? I don't know where my current polling location is. As Anjenys mentioned, our volunteers are trained specifically to answer those questions, but also to know the best practices on how to escalate that ticket or call. We do this through a number of ways. That may be working with our partners on the ground who have volunteers on election day to observe and report and follow up with issues, as well as talking to our local Board of Elections partners to see if we can address the issues day of. In addition to our day of advocacy, we also take a great pride in the work we do 365 days of a year and continue a long-term advocacy for issue spotting and patterns on how to make obstacles to vote less so that everyone who's eligible to vote can do so. Something that you may see happen on election day is long lines or a late polling location. What we do on the legal side is also use our legal skills and advocacy to litigate and file an injunction in order to extend polling hours. This is just one of the benefits of having a legal network behind us, and we're very proud of our volunteers and our network we have in place. In addition to our partnership on the ground, where we're able to problem solve and troubleshoot with those who are in Florida or any other state we work with. One other thing I want to emphasize is that the calls from the hotline come from anyone, and that includes anyone of any party, but also not just the voters and volunteers, but occasionally election officials, which has allowed us to have best practices and really issue spot on election day, so we're able to see as much as possible and address it in real time. That's another thing I want to emphasize about our hotline, is that because it is live, we're able to issue spot in real time and address things as we get those reports in. And we'll be working all day on election day to do so. I'm happy to take any additional questions, but I do think my great partner at Common Cause Florida has emphasized a lot of the work we see on the hotline, particularly in Florida, but also nationally.
All right, great. Thank you both. I have a question, Anjenys, just a clarification on something you said. So you said voters, their address, if it is different from where they actually live on their ID right now, they can still vote, and they would vote a regular ballot, not a provisional ballot?
That is correct. So in Florida, the way that the law is written is that wherever the voter says they vote, as long as they are in the correct precinct. So let's say I moved a week ago and I live on 123 Elm Street, and the polling location that I went to is the correct polling location for 123 Elm Street, then I should be receiving a regular ballot. There's no reason for me to get a provisional, as I am in the correct polling location. The poll worker is not there to question what your correct address is, and it does not have to match your ID or any of the IDs that you have.
Okay, great. We have a question from Ethan. He said, if someone shows up to the polls and finds out they have been purged, does Florida allow on-site registration?
So I'm going to share this one with Gabrielle, and I'm going to answer just the last part of it and let her answer the first part of it because it's almost a two-parter. And the last part of it is, no, unfortunately, we are not yet at the point where Florida will allow same-day registration. But purging is a different component, and I will send that back to you, Gabrielle.
So I would say this is an excellent opportunity to have someone call the hotline. The hotline is prepared to deal with voter purge questions. So a voter purge is different than not being a registered voter. Somebody who's been purged means that they've been removed from the rolls, but they were previously registered. So that is a separate issue, and I strongly encourage that they advocate for themselves and also report that into the hotline.
Yes, and of course we heard last week, you mentioned Amendment 4 during your presentation, and there's an effort now, the state of Florida, to remove thousands of ex-felons who have outstanding court debts from the voter rolls. And there's not time to do that before the election, but they're raising that issue and perhaps throwing another kind of monkey wrench in that can cause votes to be challenged after the election. Is that how you see that?
Yeah, so it's a very unfortunate thing to know that Amendment 4 in 2018 passed by an overwhelming majority of the Florida voter. So we were hopeful that the voter's voice would be heard and not be challenged. There was no need for the legislature or the courts or anyone else to get involved at this point, given that the voter, it was on the ballot, voters had spoken, and the whole point of our democracy is for the voice to be heard. We can't speculate what they will be doing next, but it was a sad day when we saw that ruling.
Indeed. Now, Gabrielle, you mentioned you have 23,000 legal volunteers. How many volunteers do you have in the field doing the poll monitoring and all that work that you mentioned, Anjenys, on election day? And are they out there now for early voting?
Go ahead, Gabrielle, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I think she was asking about the grassroots program, but we are active and have volunteers active on the hotline for early voting as well.
So Florida has right now, I'm not quite sure how many are on the ground for early voting. There's a big push for election day, but there are a few thousand folks that have registered to be volunteers. And that's everything from the social monitoring component that we have. And that's been happening for several weeks now. The mis and disinformation campaigns that we monitor and the grassroots happen. I think we're at 26 counties that we would currently be at in the election protection monitoring.
And is Sarasota County one of those counties?
I believe so. I believe Sarasota is.
We have another question that basically is asking, are there any areas of the state where your groups anticipate issues? And if so, and they are not where our local polling sites are, would we be able to get involved in that locale? So as a volunteer, are you looking for more volunteers?
Always, always, always. We can always use more eyes and ears. When I train volunteers, I always tell them, I said, this program cannot exist without you. You are our eyes and ears. You are the ones that let us know what is happening, good or bad. It's not necessarily always something bad. We encourage them to take pictures of the good things too. Sometimes a voter comes out and you see this big, huge smile on their face. Ask them if you could take a picture with them. For all you know, it's the first time they've ever voted. And they're excited and they're feeling passionate about it. So yes, we are always looking for volunteers, even if it's not a county that we have a large presence in. We can certainly, there's something for you to do.
All right. And am I correct in saying that they can go to that website, 866ourvote.org, to volunteer?
So if you're interested in volunteering, we would redirect you to, and I don't know if you want me to drop it in the chat, it's called protectthevote.net, all one word. So it's protectthevote.net. And that's where you would go to register to volunteer. And it doesn't matter if you're registering to volunteer to be a poll monitor, or if you want to do some of the social media stuff and the text banking. It's the same location. You will simply have an opportunity to choose which of the two you're interested in, and we will get you all set up.
Okay, fantastic.
And also, as there are partners on 866 Our Vote, .org, if you go to volunteer, you will also be redirected to this page.
Okay, it'll do a redirect. Okay, great. All right. So I know you're heavily focused on Election Day itself, but what we're hearing is we're not going to know the results of this election on Election Day, right? With so many vote by mail ballots coming in, they're going to be counting for a while. What are the organizations that you're working with doing to prepare for the aftermath of Election Day?
So I will say, first and foremost, the important message that we want to advocate and inform voters of is November 3rd is the last day to vote, but is not results day. That can't be said enough. I know that there's this need to have immediate understanding, like a Twitter feed, but unfortunately, we just have to be really patient. And so what we want to emphasize is, and being patient allows us to count every vote, and that's what matters, is having every vote counted. So that is something that we're advocating for. And Anjenys, if you want to share a little bit more about the work that we're doing in coalition.
So I would agree with Gabrielle. I think that we have a unified message, all nationwide, statewide, locally, and that unified message that we're trying to make sure voters understand is be patient. Election night is not equal to results night. It is better to have an accurate count than to have a fast one. And so it's almost become a mantra. Remember that we want an accurate count because you wouldn't want your voice not heard. You wouldn't want your voice not counted. So we want to respect all eligible voters' voice. And so it's better to be patient and make sure that we know that we're looking for an accurate count.
Absolutely.
Yes. And so it's coming up 12 days away now, I think, Election Day. What's the message that you want to make sure voters hear tonight?
The message I would love for voters to hear is twofold. One is to have a plan to vote, and then have a plan to advocate for yourself. So if you know you want to vote an early vote and you plan on going tomorrow, that's wonderful. If you know you want to go on Election Day, I hope that you wear a mask and stay safe. But also, when you vote, know your rights, know what voter ID to bring, know what your accurate polling place is. And if you're not sure, please reach out to us. Resources are both at 866-OUR-VOTE, but also 866-OUR-VOTE.org, where we have each state broken down, including Florida, for information that you need to know.
So I think my colleague pretty much sums it up, but in the end, vote. That's what is most important. You have put it on your to-do list. Feed dog, go to grocery store, vote. Do XYZ, vote. Don't forget to there is only one way to make your voice heard in an election, and that is to cast your ballot. If you are an eligible voter, you want to be heard, cast your ballot. Think of all the folks that don't yet have the opportunity to vote. Young children, you are also representing the rest of your community. Your vote matters, your voice matters, you matter. And that's how we maintain a strong and healthy democracy, when we are all engaged by voting. So yes, there are resources here for you. We are here to help you, but you need to take the first step and make sure you make a commitment to voting. That's what we definitely want you to take away.
Great. Well, I want to thank you both so much. Anjenys Gonzalez-Eilert from Common Cause Florida, Gabrielle Velasco from the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights. Thank you for the work that you're doing, and we hope everything goes smoothly.
Thank you.
Thank you.